somewhere else. Yes.
Here's a pen.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
I would do it right off the bat after you open the meeting.
Oh, I see.
Ask me
Okay.
any amendments
Yeah,
that
we
you
were
think
gonna,
you know.
so we can't swear her in because she's not here, right?
Right.
So we're just gonna skip that.
We have to amend the agenda to take it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay.
There you go.
Can I do it, Lamont, after I ask for an approval in the meeting agenda and we do the housing one too? You know, there's also, in the approval of the agenda, there's also a place where we had to amend it for the housing. So can I just move to that, say, I'm moving to the part of the meeting agenda for approval? And then, or you want to do it twice?
But I thought, is the approval for the prior?
No, the approval's afterwards, but I would just skip over and act as if this was not here, that this was here. So I do it within here. Once we did that, I say I need a second motion to amend the agenda because included, or we need to do it first because it's on the document.
Oh, so you know what? Oh, right. I
Oh.
would probably jump there.
Okay.
I would do, yeah, I see what you're
Okay,
saying.
okay.
Can I ask you a quick question? What is MDE?
Mr. Department of Education.
It is?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make, okay.
Yeah, I had to figure that one out too.
Okay.
Oh, here you go, John.
I signed in already.
Oh, you did? Okay.
We should all be there. Make a motion that Commissioner Barker's signature is like at the top, very top. It's not sitting on the line, but it's close. Perfect. Thank you. Got 3 whole minutes, so we'll wait 3 whole minutes. We'll wait 3 whole minutes because we have a little time. Always bring something to write a bunch of notes in, as if somehow.
You don't want that, right?
Thank you.
I was hoping that they didn't put this in because I want to muzzle me.
The entire floor is empty. It's a twilight zone moment. I'm like,
So for my wife just recently got orders from PNC that she needs to go back into the office. They're national. She's been working remotely for 3 years. Okay, she's got to go back in at least 3 days. There's nobody else in the building. She's like,
You get stuck on the elevator, you're just there.
yeah, yeah.
She gets a good parking place.
She does, she does. But her boss is like, make sure you go in because they are pulling the swipe cards to make sure you're going.
Wow, yeah. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I now call to order the meeting of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. Today is Monday, July 24th, 2023. The time is 10 a.m. Mr. Satchel, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner El Hassan,
Present.
Commissioner Lara,
Present.
Commissioner Barker,
Present.
Commissioner Corvo,
Present.
Commissioner Gasco Bentley, Commissioner Londo,
Present.
Commissioner Worthams,
Here.
Commissioner Roberson.
Present.
Madam Chair, with 7 of 8 members, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Attorney Satchel. Please also note that this meeting is being live streamed with auto captions and recorded. The recording will be made available to the public once it is made accessible. Before we get started, our plan on the agenda was to swear in our reappointed Commissioner Regina Gasco Bentley. Unfortunately, she was unable to make it to this meeting this morning. So before we get started, I'm asking for a motion to amend the agenda and to remove that from the agenda at this time.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that we strike item 2 from the agenda.
Support.
Thank you so much. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Hearing none, I'll continue. The next agenda item is approval of the now corrected agenda. Is there a motion to approve or amend the agenda additionally?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move we approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you so much. Is there
Second.
a second? Thank you so much. And additionally, there also should be a motion, to amend the agenda to add to the new business discussion regarding the Housing Discrimination Conference recommended by Executive Director Johnson in the Executive Committee meeting. May I have a motion to amend the agenda for that matter?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Londo. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have support from Commissioner Worthams. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, and now the agenda is approved. Good morning once again, and welcome to the meeting of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. We thank those who have had us here in Marquette on the campus of Northern Michigan University. Before we continue with our opening matters agenda item, we will have our General Counsel and Special Advisor, Lamont Satchel, to provide the role and authority of the commission for our audience. Attorney Satchel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Michigan Civil Rights Commission was created by the Michigan Constitution in 1963 to safeguard constitutional and legal guarantees against discrimination. The Commission is charged with investigating alleged discrimination against any person because of religion, race, color, or national origin, genetic information, sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, age, marital status, height, weight, arrest record, and physical and mental disability. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights was created in 1965 and serves as the operational arm of the Commission. Passage of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act and the Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act in 1976 further clarified specific protections guaranteed under Michigan law. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Attorney Satchel. We will now move on to item B, recognition of significant observances in July. There are several significant observances during the month of July relevant to civil rights, and we would like to recognize the following. July is Disability Pride Month and National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. July 2nd is the date of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that was signed into law, and also the birthday of Thurgood Marshall. July 18th is the birthday of Nelson Mandela. And last, July 26th is the 33rd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA. Moving on to item C, public comment protocol. We will have Attorney Satchel to provide the protocol for public comment. Again, Attorney Satchel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Chair Roberson and Commissioners. Please note there will be 2 opportunities to provide public comment during today's meeting. If attendees wish to speak during the public comment portion of the agenda, you must sign up to do so within the next 10 minutes by completing a public comment form. If you require assistance, please notify a Michigan Department of Civil Rights staff member at the sign-in table. When it's time for public comment, Chair Roberson will call on attendees in the order in which we receive their request to speak. The public comment time frame for speaking will be 2 minutes. The timekeeper will verbally remind each speaker when 30 seconds remain. Please also be aware that the Michigan Department of Civil Rights staff will verbally warn any speakers only once if they use inappropriate, inflammatory, or disrespectful language. If use of that language continues, the speaker will be asked to stop speaking. That completes the public comment protocol, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Attorney Satchel. The next agenda item is adoption of the consent agenda. The following items from the agenda have been identified as those that may not require commission discussion prior to being adopted or received. Items may be removed from the consent agenda on the request of any commission member. Items not removed will then be moved for adoption by general consent without debate. Removed items will be taken up later on the agenda as indicated. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Lara. Thank you. A motion has been made by Commissioner Lara. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Elasan, we have support from you. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, and the consent agenda is adopted. Our next agenda item is approval of minutes. We have received and reviewed the draft minutes for the April 24th, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as submitted?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Worthams?
I move approval of the minutes from April 24th, 2023.
A motion has been made by Commissioner Worthams. Is there a second?
Second.
We have the support from Commissioner Corvo. Is there any discussion or revisions to the minutes? Hearing no discussion or any revisions, all in favor of the motion to approve the April 24th minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion carries unanimously, and the April 24th minutes are approved. Our next agenda item is public comment. Again, if any guest in the audience would like to give public comment, please complete one of the gold forms made available at the registration table. Ms. Sanford will collect the forms. As a reminder, we will be taking comments in the order received. You will have 2 minutes to speak before the commission. Please note our timekeeper is Mr. Satchel. Ms. Sanford, have we received any forms?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no forms.
Thank you very much. Hearing no public comment at this time, we will continue on. Our next agenda item is division and other reports. We will start with our Executive Director, Attorney John E. Johnson, Jr. Good morning, Director Johnson. We have received your written report, and you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Good morning, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to present before you this morning as we are here in Northern Michigan. I think first time we've been here in quite a while, and thank you. So I appreciate you in the hosting of Commissioner Londo. This is his stomping grounds. We appreciate all that you've shown us hospitality, Commissioner Londo. As Chair Roberson reported, I did submit a written report. I'm going to speak to that a little bit and perhaps just do some ad-libbing along the way. As I usually, I started out with some personnel changes within the department, and you see here that we've added a couple of new hires. We added a senior executive management assistant for our deputy executive director, Kim Woolridge, and also hired a fund development coordinator. That's significant in terms of the first time that position has been available and filled within the department, and it's an effort to go after private monies that we're now allowed to get. When I arrived 2 years ago, in the boilerplate language of the appropriations that we received allowed us to collect $85,000 in private monies for publications, FOIA requests, things of that nature, and just private donations. We've now upped that starting fiscal year '24 to $600,000. So there's a significant amount of money that we'll be able to raise from the private sector. Thus, we hired the fund development coordinator in order to fulfill that position. She's already met with the governor's office of foundation liaison in order to start making some connections and networking in order to make sure that she can fulfill our goal of raising that $600,000. We're looking primarily in the DEI area and community engagement area in terms of raising some additional funding. But in addition to that, we also are allowed to raise $376,000 with legislative approval. So that gives her up to almost $1 million that we can possibly raise in private funding. So we look forward to her putting together a fundraising strategy and achieving those goals during the next fiscal year. We also added 6 investigators, 4 department technicians, and 2 secretaries in our enforcement division, and we added 1 department technician. We had a couple of retirements and departures, so I want to note that I think there were 3 people who left during the quarter, 1 who are retired and 2 who left the state, but we hired over 14 people and promoted 2 people. So certainly the department is growing, as I will talk about during the next part of my report, and that would be the budget update. Some of you may have seen the article that appeared in the Detroit News last week about the amount of monies that the department will receive under the fiscal year 24 budget. Governor Whitmer has not signed that yet, but we anticipate that she will the next couple of weeks. That funding boosts our ongoing funding by $8,811,300. That's ongoing money. That's money that we'll see every year in our general fund dollars. We have $5 million in one-time funding, and that will be $2 million for enforcement in order to look at the expansion of the ELCRA that has been undertaken by the legislature. As you know, there will be 2 new protected classes in ELCRA starting in March. One for sexual orientation, the other for gender identity and expression. So those will be the 2 new protected classes, in addition to the Crown Act, which was passed, which would now be additional protection within the ELCRA, and that's discrimination on the basis of hair. So $2 million was added one-time funding for us to look at those expanded amendments for ELCRA, and then one-time funding for our disability unit in order to implement a digital accessibility plan throughout the state in compliance with ADA, and then another discretionary $250,000, which will go to our community engagement division. So we're very pleased with the amount of money we'll get in enforcement. Over $7.2 million. About 5.5 of that will be for ongoing enforcement matters. That would include the backlog that we have in addition to the new matters that we are undertaking, but especially $1.6 million we set aside for a disparate impact unit, which we'll be looking at that unit in order to look at disparate impact policies that we discover through intake and through other mechanisms that we may feel as if there's something that we need to take a more in-depth look at. The individual cases, again, will continue, but also we want to set aside some money. That'll be ongoing also for disparate impact cases. You recall we went out to Grand Rapids and did some hearings out there, received a number of complaints, over 60, but did not have the resources in order to follow up on what we felt may have been some policies that had a disparate impact on race out there. So with this funding, we'll be able to not only do this ourselves, but certainly have an ongoing budget in order to look at disparate impact matters. So that's our fiscal 24 budget. It allows us to increase our full-time employees by 51 employees. We'll not be able to hire that many because of the salaries that we anticipate offering, but also we're going to be incorporating people we've hired on a temporary basis with the money we received this year. As you recall, we had one-time funding for the backlog. Some of those people will be moved over into permanent positions with additional funding. And speaking about enforcement, one of the priorities of this commission is the backlog. I did report on that, but pleased to report that as of the end of June, there's a little over 1,400 backlog cases. That's a decrease of almost more than half of what existed when 2 years ago there were 2,900 backlog cases, and now there's 1,414. So hats off, tip of the hat to Marcelina Trevino, Marlene Kane, and the entire enforcement division for looking at that backlog and reducing it by more than half. So we applaud them for that hard work. And again, as they continue to meet the contracts that we have under our federal obligations, both under EEOC and the HUD contracts, those have all will be met this year with the efforts, again, of the enforcement staff. We had a successful Civil Rights Summit back on June 27th. As you know, the focus of the summit was the impact of discrimination on health, and we had breakout sessions on education and health, environmental justice and health, social determinants of health, the LGBTQ community and health, disability and health, and actually housing and health. It was very successful. We had over 250 people who attended at the summit out in Novi. It was taped. We are going through those videos now, putting together, doing a synopsis of the strategies that were articulated, and then we'll be putting that together, in addition to putting the entire summit on Facebook, so people will have opportunity to see that. We didn't have it, couldn't live stream it, but we did videotape it, and that will be available to the public as soon as we go through that and edit it, and then do and synthesize again all the strategies that were offered during that summit. I already mentioned fund development and how excited we are with the opportunity to bring on Lilietta Stoneback in order to be able to raise some additional monies for the program. That pretty much completes my report. Are there any questions? I do want to mention that of the monies that we did receive, the fiscal year 24 monies, 890,000 of that will be going to our community engagement and enforcement division, and a part of that will be to establish a new all-pack chapter here in the Upper Peninsula. We do not have one here, so some of that money will be allocated towards organizing this area in order to establish, again, an all-pack, which is advocates and leaders for police and community trust. It's been successful in other areas of the state. We did receive monies in order to establish a unit here. So Charles Schroeder of our Community Engagement and Education Division will be working with that division director, Tony Lewis, in order to establish that chapter here in the Upper Peninsula, again, once we receive those monies on October the 1st.
Thank you, Executive Director Johnson. Are there any questions from any other commissioners?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Worthams?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director, for your report. Let me begin by way of thanks to Chairwoman Angela Whitwer and Chairwoman Senator Sarah Anthony for their support of your efforts in the budget process. As someone who's been through numerous budget processes, when the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference makes a change in May that was dramatically different from February, I know my blood pressure typically goes up, so I can imagine that the staff's blood pressure went up as well. But thanks to your efforts with the appropriations chairs, I think we were able to defend the one-time appropriations that were in the budget and ideally set up a scenario for continued good work into the future. So again, through you, Director, and the staff, to Reps Whitwer and Senator Anthony, thank you for that. My question is one of just getting your sense, your confidence about the how successful we will be with these one-time appropriations. Do you believe that now that we've won that budget battle, that the proposal for change will move ahead fairly effectively and be successful?
I do. Again, the one-time appropriations are helpful because we do expect an expansion of work, continued expansion of work. But in addition to, by the way, now that you mentioned that, and an issue was raised among with the chair and myself and former Representative Mel Larson of the Elliott Larson Act about the need perhaps to submit a proposal for change for fiscal year 24, which covers the commission. there are a number of important obligations that this commission has, and the monies that we were allocated are for services from the department, not necessarily for the work of the commission. So we'll be submitting a proposal for change for next fiscal year, which will incorporate what we think are the needs of the commission. We're working with you on putting that together. Just things of this nature. These meetings, we certainly the desire to meet across the state. You'll hear me ask later about the desire to have a public hearing on house discrimination. That costs money. The public hearings we had last week in Lawrence, Michigan, which, by the way, I did not mention, we did have a public hearing, and that was to determine the conditions of migrant seasonal farm workers in Lawrence. That was held last Sunday. That was expense involved in that. So we will be, again, in fiscal year 25, looking at putting together something that will provide additional monies for this body in order to be able to operate in the manner in which you, I know, would like. But in terms of this year, yes, we do thank the appropriation chairs. You know, it was tight going. There was a recommendation from the House that the monies, that the ongoing monies be slashed significantly by $7 million, be substituted for $11 million in just one-time monies, which was unacceptable for us. We've had difficulty with one-time monies because we can't hire people. We have to advertise positions for limited term as opposed to a permanent position. As a result, we're not getting sort of candidates that we'd like when we have one-time monies. So that was the House proposal. The Senate proposal slashed the proposal by the governor by $3 million, but it was ongoing money. Again, thanks to the hard work, quite frankly, of the State Budget Office and those appropriation chairs, as you mentioned, and then the work of the staff. I think we certainly use the opportunity to send out information to all the legislatures about the importance of making sure this was ongoing money and how one-time money straps us. It does not help us at all because we have to come back every year and fight for that. So thanks to again the rallying of the message by the staff. We also got some help from the University of Michigan Civil Litigation Unit, the Michigan NACP, the ACRL, two fair housing centers are writing a letter to the legislature about the importance and the constitutional obligation for them to fund the commission for you to be effective. And at that point, the amount of money we had received over the past several years was not allowing us to be effective. So because of that, all that came together, and everyone realized that the right thing to do was to fund the governor's recommendation, despite the bad news that came out that they were like, what, $1.1 billion less than what they thought would have in terms of revenue. We did come out ahead of this, and we are thankful for that. And it will allow us, again, to grow our operation substantially. But I'm very confident going forward. The ongoing money will stay. We'll look at what we get in terms of new ELCA protections, keep that data, and then if need be, ask for continuation, ongoing money for that expansion, as opposed to just this one-time money we'll get next year. But it all comes down to the data, too, Commissioner. We'll be keeping track of that as we go forward. Thank you. Hope that answered your question. I'm not sure. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Executive Director Johnson, and thank you, Commissioner Worthams. Are there any other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, General Counsel Report from Attorney Lamont Satchel. Mr. Satchel, we've received your written report, and you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. You will recall, I have two items. The first one is with respect to the Commission's rule amendments. You'll recall that over 2 years ago, this body began the process of amending its administrative rules. At the time that we last met, we were in the final leg of the process. We had our the rules submitted, and we were sitting before JCAR, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. After our last meeting in April, JCAR did not object to our rule amendments, and they were subsequently approved and sent to the or submitted to the Secretary of State on May 16th. The Secretary of State on that date signed them and approved them and issued a notice of filing of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission's proposed rule changes. Since then, the rules became effective as of the date of the filing of that notice, which was May the 16th, and subsequently, the department has prepared and implemented a schedule and plan to put in place the rules. They've also been posted to the department's and the commission's website. Madam Chair, the last item relates to the dynamic character legislation issue. You'll recall, since the passage of that legislation, over the strenuous objection of the department with respect to the legality of it, we began talks with various interested party stakeholders within state government to come to a resolution, as it would require the commission and the department to engage in activity that we determined was contrary to law. At our last meeting, we indicated to you that we had met with those stakeholders, and coming out of that, the department sat down and tried to come up with a legislative fix. We have subsequently amended the legislation. We have a draft amendment to the legislation, and we submitted it to our attorneys in the AG's office, who has shared it with the attorneys in the AG's office for the Michigan Department of Transportation. Our fix was to make the Department of Transportation responsible for this, as they were the likely person within state government who would have the knowledge and the ability and the money to do the types of study and inquiry that was necessary in order to effect that, bring the legislation to fruition. Since then, we had a meeting last week, internal meeting with the head of the legislative affairs for the governor. She is working with us to bring MDOT to the table to get them on board, and is committed to work with us to get the legislation passed or a fix as necessary to make sure that the commission is not responsible for that legislation. We hope to have a meeting with them, I believe, in the upcoming weeks, and we will inform the commission with respect to the outcome of that. But so far, things are looking very good in terms of remedying this situation. I have no further report, Madam Chair. Commission, thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Satchel, for your report. Commissioners, are there any questions? Comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, a presentation from Harold Corr, Director of Special Projects. Mr. Corr, if you would please come to the podium for your report. Good morning, Mr. Cora. I recognize you're doing a number of duties this morning, so forgive me for catching you off guard. You have the floor.
Good morning, Commission. I'm really here to talk about a couple of things. First being the date. I don't know if we picked a date for the housing conference mentioned we were looking at late October / early November. And also there will be, for the 60th anniversary of the commission, we were looking at early December for a gathering. So the commission needed to potentially find some dates that can work with your schedules for those dates. And other than that, we can talk a little bit about the commission anniversary function. We're basically just talking about a small function, not anything major, not a large event, kind of intimate, an opportunity to invite some of the staff and partners and the public that are interested in civil rights issues, just to kind of commemorate that 60th anniversary. And I know Director talked about the Housing Summit a little bit, but it's a 2-day event with a public forum on the first day in order to gather testimony in housing, and the second day being resource fair and some topics and discussions to allow advocates and others to address some of the issues that were raised on the previous day. So basically, we just need to kind of see if there's some available dates that work with your schedules for those two events.
Mr. Core, forgive me, you said late October, early November for the housing summit?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So commissioners, as you might expect, the year is getting away from us pretty quickly, and there are a couple of things that we had planned for this year, and so we would like to get some idea of dates that work. Keeping in mind that we have a meeting in Traverse City on, what's the date again?
October 24th.
4th, Madam.
October 24th. So we'll have that, but in addition, we're looking for a date to participate in the Housing Summit if in fact we decide we want to do the Housing Summit, which will come up a little bit later. So keep that in mind as we move towards that part of the discussion, but also 23rd, October 23rd, my apologies for the meeting in Traverse City, but understanding that we also will have to travel. So it may be that you're coming in on that Sunday, similar to how many of us did this weekend. In addition, the gala was an opportunity for us to celebrate the 60th year of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, and also to, as Mr. Core said, invite partners, also perhaps invite past commissioners to enjoy and break bread with us maybe early in the month of December. We know that there are a lot of holiday parties. We'll add another one to the calendar, so keep that in mind as we discuss potential dates for that as well. Are there comments, concerns, questions? I don't know, Mr. Core, if you would like us to come up with a date right now, or if that's something we can sort of think about as we move through the business of the meeting and then come back to during our new business. Is that okay?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, all right, so I'll
Or
put
do you
that.
have suggested dates?
I know. Are there suggested dates? I'm sorry, Mr. Core, other than the general end of the October, early November, are there some particular dates you all have looked at, particularly for the Housing Summit?
Yes, if you don't mind, Madam
Yeah,
Chair.
sure.
Since we are meeting in Traverse City on the 23rd, I think we're looking probably the week of October 30th,
Okay.
which, and no later, and because then the next week is Election Day, and then you start getting into mid-November. So we're really looking at probably the week of October 30th, and perhaps a date that we might want to look at for a seminar. And I was going to talk about that a little more in depth later.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this? You said the week of October 30th, so this will give my fellow commissioners a chance to sort of glance at their calendars while we're here, to look and see if that would work for most. And then is there a potential date for the gala? And I don't know if I should call it a gala, the
Basically, the
celebration, dinner celebration?
Yes.
Okay.
But basically, we're looking at the first week in December for that as well.
Okay, that's the week of the 4th?
Yeah.
Sure.
Right, and the reason for that, Madam Chair, is because, as you recall, the 60th anniversary date of this commission is January the 3rd, 2024. That's the date the first commission met on January 3rd, 1964. So, given that that date is obviously January 3rd, we thought we might do something before the end of the year to celebrate what would be an upcoming 60th anniversary, combine it with a holiday, perhaps, event sometime towards maybe the first week in December or so, or thereabouts, again, for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ellison?
Thank you, Chair. Just curious if the summit, I think I heard you say it's a 2-day event, right?
The
And
housing
then,
conference is a 2-day event, yes.
and then I presume it's all day, both days, or is it? I mean, I'm trying to get an idea of the
Yeah.
hours, number one, and number two, what sort of commitment for attendance are you requiring or expecting of commissioners? And is it something that we can attend, in the AM or the PM, or sort of what do you need from commissioners with respect to the summit and with respect to attendance?
So for the first day of this event would be public testimony. Hours are not set, but we're looking at from about 3 o'clock to about 7 o'clock, so that we can get people that can attend during the day, and then people who have to come after work. That will be an event designed to gather testimony from people regarding housing discrimination and credit discrimination and things of that nature. That would probably be most important for members of the commission to be there to hear that testimony, to hear what people are sharing. The next day, again, would be more of an all-day event, an opportunity for resources to be disseminated and for discussion about how we solve some of those things. So, I mean, I would think being there to hear some of the actual testimony would be important, and then the next day, as much as possible, I guess.
And I suspect that testimony will be recorded, transcribed.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, yes, Commissioner Lara.
Yes, a couple of questions regarding locations. Which cities do you intend on having, since some of us may have to travel?
Yes. As of right now, I know we initially were talking about doing this in Detroit, both days in Detroit. I have been investigating the possibility of some kind of teleconference in another with another area, with the primary conference and primary forum being in Detroit, and some possibility of a secondary site with teleconferencing. No promises there. It's just something that I've been investigating to see if that's possible.
Possibly to be able to obtain testimony from other parts of the state?
Yeah, well, specifically the western side, Grand Rapids. I know there was some potential interest in something being held in the Grand Rapids area, so I've been looking into that as well.
And then my other question is the thought of where the celebration would be, which city?
Again, I believe probably Detroit. There is some possibility of looking at Lansing as well, but I think the focus has been on Detroit thus far.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner Alisson?
Given that this isn't a public meeting, and we will not be taking action as a commission, but rather listening to testimony, is there a Zoom option? I presume it could be live streamed, but also for testimony to be provided via a Zoom option, right?
That's the
I think
intent.
that's applicable, okay. And for commissioners to attend via Zoom, possibly?
Sure. Those details haven't been worked out, but actually, what I really want to do is your commitment to having the public hearing at this first, and then we'd work out the details later. But certainly, all that is considered. In that we are a statewide organization, we want to make sure we reach everyone as we can across the state. We certainly would want to look at having this live streamed, enable people to be able to testify from across the state. But as Harold mentioned, we're looking at probably maybe an afternoon for the public testimony, and then the next day, a full day of resources. I've contacted, and I guess we're getting into the
Well, I was going to say, I'm gonna pause you, Director Johnson, because I know this is on our agenda, and Mr. Corr was here for his presentation earlier than no, it was not, just the timeline of the agenda. So thank you for what you've presented so far, Mr. Corr. I think when we get to that part of the agenda, you may be called back up for additional questions. But until now, I'm gonna let all of the commissioners look at their calendars, kind of think about this a little bit, and then we'll come back to the discussion later on in the agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to our next agenda item, Attorney General Report from Heather Meingast. Am I pronouncing that right?
You are. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Division Chief of the Civil Rights and Elections Division in the Attorney General's Office. Ms. Meingast is replacing Assistant Attorney General Tanya Jeter, who was unable to join us today. Good morning, Attorney Meingast, and thank you for joining us. We have received your written report, and you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to Commissioners. I'm happy to join you here in beautiful Marquette. You have Ms. Jeter's written report in your packet today, so I don't think we need to go in detail over the cases, but this is your sort of your litigation update. So I'm going to kind of briefly run through these. The first 4 items actually on your packet sheet, the report, have really all been resolved. Those were all either appeals from some of the administrative proceedings that were ongoing in the Ligon, Hodges, and Mason cases. Those were all we were successful in all of those appeals, so those are closed out. That would take you to item number 5. That's an appeal by Ms. Gardner from the dismissal of her complaint. We have an appellate brief due actually on that today, so that will be filed on your behalf. Item number 6 is a case that's been sitting sort of quietly in the federal court. I'm waiting disposition on motions for summary disposition or summary judgment. I would note that there is a little bit of an update that's not on there. Earlier this spring, the plaintiffs did file a pleading essentially to bring to the court's attention that this case has kind of been languishing before it for the last couple of years. So the court hasn't acted, but it's possible that that will get some traction. Maybe we'll see that resolved. That litigation probably predates many, many of you, so we should be set there. Items 7, 8, and 9 are what we call the religious accommodations cases. That's the Christian healthcare case, Sacred Heart, and St. Joseph. Christian healthcare was dismissed. It remains pending on a motion for reconsideration. The Sacred Heart and St. Joseph cases are fully briefed for motions to dismiss. In all 3 cases, we have been responding to a number of notices of supplemental authority that the plaintiffs' counsels have been filing. Most recently, in all 3 cases, the plaintiffs' counsel filed notices for the recent decision in the 303 creative case from the U.S. Supreme Court. So we've been busy responding to those notices. On the Sacred Heart and St. Joseph case, we've been wondering if perhaps the judge wasn't waiting for 303 creative to be decided before she also disposed of those cases. So we're hopeful that maybe we'll get some action in the remaining 2 cases and also close out Christian Health as well. So those are proceeding along on track. That would take you to item number 10, the Gasca case. That is also pending on a motion to dismiss in the federal court. That's a complaint over sort of alleging the failure of the Civil Rights Department to sort of properly investigate Mr. Gasca's claims. Item number 11 is the City of Grand Rapids versus MDCR complaint that was fairly recently filed in the Court of Claims. We are going to talk about that later in closed session. So essentially they're seeking a declaration that the 3-year statute of limitations that applies to Elliott Larson cases brought in the circuit court should also be applied to your administrative proceedings. So we'll be briefing that, and an answer or the response to the complaint is due at the end of this week in that case, but we can discuss that more later. That would bring you to item number 12. That is the IAEA versus City of Grand Rapids case. In that one, the IAEA case is in an active investigation stage. The City of Grand Rapids has been objecting to responding to discovery requests from the commission, on behalf of the department for the commission. So we ended up having to file a complaint in circuit court to compel answers to discovery in that case. So that was just recently filed. And so we are kind of, negotiating with them a little bit to see if we can, get this resolved. But if not, the court will resolve that for us. So that's really it for, there is actually one other case that's not on here. Some of you may have been served or not. That's I think it's John Harris versus a lot of people, right? Department of Civil Rights and former, current and former employees. So it looks like the plaintiff's counsel, or he's not his counsel, but is in the process of sort of serving people piecemeal. So we intend to sort of reach out with the plaintiff to see if we can stipulate to answering or responding to the complaint when everybody has been served, or we can determine that he's done trying to serve people, so that we don't have deadlines that are offset with people being served earlier than not. So we'll work on that and get that taken care of as well. That's another case where the plaintiff believes that his complaints were not appropriately investigated by the Department of Civil Rights. So other than that, we are happy to keep assisting Marcelina Trevino's shop and the enforcement folks with questions they have or concerns regarding the continuing investigations that they have there. I do want to compliment Marcelina and Marlene on how hard everybody has worked on the investigations and some of the administrative proceedings that we've been fortunate to be a part of and help the commission with and departments, so. And we're also happy to continue dialogue with Attorney Satchel on the dynamic sign issues, so we're always standing by to see if we can assist any further. That sounds like hopefully it's heading in the right direction, so perhaps we won't have any more tasks associated with that. So with that, that would conclude the report from the Department of Attorney General.
Thank you, Attorney Meingas, for your report. I did have one question of my fellow commissioners. Have all of us been served? I will say us because I have been. Some of us have not been at this point. Okay.
Madam Chair, just to be clear, they only, with respect to commissioners, they only listed, they didn't list the newer commissioners because it happened back in 2018. So whoever were commissioners back in 2018
I understand.
were named.
Okay. Thank you so much. So there's a great possibility that the ones who have not been served will not be served. That would seem to be.
Newer members will not be served.
Okay.
They were not, yes.
Okay.
I think that's probably right, Madam Chair, that the plaintiff is probably a little bit confused as to how he should make service on everybody, and it would certainly be more difficult for him to try to serve former employees, locating addresses and all that. So I think probably what will happen is at some point, we'll just call time on service, and we'll just simply end up filing, a motion to dismiss on behalf of those who've been served, and simply state that the same arguments would apply to everybody else. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Attorney. Are there any questions or comments from other commissioners?
I just have one question that I'm not sure whether you are aware of or not, and I'd prefer not to say the name on the record because I don't know if we're taking any action or if there's any response, but I've received numerous emails regarding a financial aid eligibility request. I think my fellow commissioners and the Attorney General, I think everybody in state government's been copied on this email. So I don't know if anybody else is familiar with that.
I don't
No?
recall seeing it.
Okay, I will forward it on
Okay.
to you. I thought everybody else was copied, but.
Any other comments or questions, commissioners? Thank you again for your report, and we'll continue to move on through our agenda. The next up is myself with the chair's report. Once again, I'd like to say thank you to Northern Michigan for hosting us. As Executive Director Johnson pointed out, it's been some time since we were in this part of the state, and I think it's important that we recognize that this is a commission and a department that covers the entire state. And so traveling here was an experience for all of us. Some of us who, like myself, had not been here before, but it is beautiful to be here. And hopefully as we return to the UP, we will encourage people to come out and voice their concerns, their complaints, or just see what the commission does and see what the department does. So thank you again for having us. And again, specifically, thank you to Commissioner Londo, because this is, as Al Roker would say, his neck of the woods. And we had a wonderful opportunity to fellowship and have dinner last evening, which is an opportunity we don't often get together. So thank you for putting that together, Commissioner Londo. In addition, I'd like to particularly thank Sean Sanford from the department, who does an incredible job of making sure we are all the ducks are in a row and that everything is taken care of. So thank you, Sean, for making sure that we traveled here safely and that we hopefully will travel home safely, but making sure that everything is in order. So we really appreciate it. And we don't do it often enough to make sure we say thank you to you. In addition, I wanted to just make a comment about the Civil Rights Summit. I did have an opportunity to attend. It was a very impactful summit. I attended the education and healthcare with Dr. Rima Vassar, which hugely important topic, but also really important words and thoughts that came out of that part of the summit. And so I think everybody enjoyed it. It was very well attended. And I think it speaks to the ongoing growth of the presence of the department. And so, I think that's one of the reasons we were in Lawrence, Michigan last week for the hearing, to hear from people, to try to hear their concerns and meet them where they are instead of always having them have to come to us. And so I think that is really, really important. And I know that as Executive Director Johnson said, he and I had the wonderful opportunity to sit down with Mel Larson, rather, from the Elliott Larson Act, and he talked about the need to hold hearings and really pull together things that the department hasn't had an opportunity to do in quite some time. And with that, I would join with Commissioner Worthams in thanking the state senators and state house, the appropriations committee, and those who understand the importance of having a very full and well-funded civil rights department. I think it's so important. We've seen a lot of issues that have risen to the surface over the last couple of years and continue to be an issue throughout the state of Michigan. And I think it's important that the citizens of the state of Michigan recognize that the work of the department and the work of my fellow commissioners is extremely important at this time. So with that, I'll continue on. Our next commission business item is committee updates for Commission 2023 priorities. Last year, the commission adopted several priorities for 2023. Committees were formed to take the lead and focus on their assigned priority and bring recommendations to the commission regarding next steps, which may include, but are not limited to, holding special meetings, public hearings, listening sessions, inviting special guests and/or expert witnesses, and preparing studies and/or reports. Let's begin with the Voting Rights Committee. I don't know if Commissioner Worthams has a report for this meeting. I know I've been told that there will be one next meeting, but I'll let you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. So we purposely did not hold a subcommittee meeting since our last meeting so that the staff could prepare themselves and focus on the August primary in accordance with the plan that was shared at our last meeting. So I look forward to convening a meeting probably in September to hear the results of our efforts in improving the turnout for the August primary and to see what lessons have been gained from that experience so that they can put those into action for November and, of course, going into the more exciting even-numbered year as well. So look forward to giving a more complete report at our next meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Worthams, and I would trust that going into 2024 is going to be a busy time for this committee, so thank you so much. Any commissioners have any questions or comments? Seeing none, we thank the Voting Rights Committee, and next we will hear from the Chair of the Safe Learning Environments and Education Equity Committee, Vice Chair Elasan. Vice Chair Elasan, are there currently any updates from the Safe Learning Environments and Education Equity Committee?
Good morning. Thank you so much for the floor. Just briefly, as this commission knows, we released the Education Equity Report a couple years ago. From this, the department has worked with MDCR's Council for Government and Education on Equity and Inclusion to develop a resource guide to developing an equity plan in collaboration with the Michigan Department of Education. The department is now bringing the council together in September to explore ways to make this tool more accessible, including higher ed, and they are currently connecting with DEI directors across major universities to understand what currently exists in the areas of planning for equity and how we can collaborate to make this tool more comprehensive. I also wanted to note on the record this morning my sincerest thanks to all involved in the budgeting process at the state level, but in particular I want to commend Governor Whitmer for signing a $24.3 billion education budget, which begins this October. This budget will ensure educational equity for children across Michigan.
Thank you, Vice Chair Elasan, for your update. Commissioners, are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, we will thank the Safe Learning Environments and Education Equity Committee for your work. And last, we will hear from the Chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Commissioner Lara, are there currently any updates from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have already heard a brief report about the Civil Rights Summit, which was focusing on health and inequities and social determinants of health and understanding how they contribute to the overall well-being of our population here in the state of Michigan. You will be hearing, I think, about the Housing Summit, which all across the state there are major issues with housing affordability as well as discrimination. And I think that should really be something that we will be paying a lot of attention to. And the migrant workers hearing in Lawrence, Michigan was, I thought, quite well attended by the commissioners, and we heard some very interesting information about how their experiences have changed since COVID, and it is time to really focus on finalizing that whole report and study, which I believe is in the process. Still to come is our focus on Native Americans, indigenous people. There is a, hang on, let me flip the page. There is a proposal for additional funds and time to complete the Native American boarding school study. That concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lara, and thank you to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for your work and your update. I am going to table the discussion around the Environmental Justice Committee because we were waiting to have both of our new commissioners seated while we have Commissioner Barker at this time. We don't yet have a swearing in of Commissioner Gaskell Bentley because she was unable to attend today. So we will work on making sure that committee is fully chaired before our next meeting. We will now move on to the next order of business, Commission 2023 priorities. Our next item of business is subcommittee for the Commission's 60th anniversary. 2023 is the 60th anniversary of the creation of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. Vice Chair Elisan, Secretary Lara, and myself volunteered to serve on this subcommittee to begin planning a rollout of events in celebration of the Commission's 60th anniversary. You have already heard a little bit about that from Mr. Kaur, and so we don't have an additional update at this time. We are trying to determine the date. And as I indicated, if we can look at that first week in December and solidify a date that the commission as well as the department can begin to work on. And certainly I know Mr. Kaur is anxious for us to have a date for him to make some plans. So I'd ask my commissioners, my fellow commissioners, to continue to look at their calendars and see what might work for them and give us a couple of dates that we can provide to Mr. Kaur. We will now move on to the next agenda item, new business. Commissioners, we have 4 new business items for discussion. The first is a proclamation on the ADA's 33rd anniversary, and the second is a resolution in support of executive and legislative actions addressing hate crimes and acts of desecration. Commissioner Barker will get us started by introducing the ADA proclamation. Commissioner Barker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Not all the page is in view. Please turn your head a bit to the right and try again.
Okay. Technology.
That's okay, we have time.
Michigan Civil Rights Commission proclamation in recognition and honor of 33 degrees anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Whereas the individual mode, manner and means of interacting with society, negotiating the physical and psychological demands of life, participating in social activities and individual pursuits, and the joyful display of expressive conduct are equally the birthright of all peoples and are to be respected, valued, encouraged, and facilitated by government irrespective of one's condition at birth or later acquired. Whereas disability is a natural part of the human experience and more than 2.3 million people in Michigan report having some type of disability. And whereas people with disabilities make innumerable contributions to our world and the communities in which they live every day. And whereas the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, is a comprehensive civil rights law that was passed on July 26, 1990 to secure and protect the civil rights of people with disabilities. And why? Whereas the Michigan Civil Rights Commission affirms the tenets of non-discrimination, equity, and inclusion for all people with disabilities to ensure a vibrant and diverse makeup of every Michigan community. And whereas the Michigan Civil Rights Commission recognizes that while great progress has been made, the full promise of the ADA has yet to be achieved as people with disabilities still experience a broad range of barriers including but not limited to, the areas of attitudinal bias, healthcare equity, digital accessibility, and transportation options. Now, therefore, the Michigan Civil Rights Commission hereby recognizes and honors July 26, 2023 as the 33 inches anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act and commits to continuing working toward true equity and full access for all persons with disabilities.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also like to add that because of this act and the department of, such departments as the Michigan Department and Bureau of Blindness, I've been able to maintain employment, I've been able to enjoy life, I've been able to read, write, text, and orate what needs to be done in the job place, help those who can or won't help themselves, and continually enjoy life.
Thank you, Commissioner Barker. I think your personal statement is as impactful as the proclamation, and I thank you for presenting it today. I will entertain a motion to adopt the proclamation in recognition of the 33rd anniversary of the ADA. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Ellison has moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Lara has seconded. Is there any discussion or revisions? Seeing no hands for discussion, Mr. Satchel, will you please call the roll for adoption of the proclamation?
Commissioner El Hassan,
Support.
Commissioner Lara,
Support.
Commissioner Barker,
Support.
Commissioner Corvo,
Support.
Commissioner Londo,
Support.
Commissioner Worthams,
Support.
Commissioner Roberson.
Support.
Madam Chair, it unanimously passes with those present, members present.
Thank you, Attorney Satchel. Again, the motion carries unanimously, and the proclamation is adopted. Thank you again, Commissioner Barker, for sponsoring this proclamation, and I thank Attorney Tyra Khan and Attorney Satchel for your assistance in preparing this proclamation. Our second new business item is a resolution in support of executive and legislative actions addressing hate crimes, acts of desecration, which will be introduced by Commissioner Lara. Commissioner Lara, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A resolution in support of executive and legislative efforts to address hate crimes and acts of desecration. Whereas the Michigan Civil Rights Commission is a public body established under Article 5, Section 29 of the Michigan Constitution, which vests the commission with the power to investigate alleged discrimination against any person because of religion, race, color, or national origin in the enjoyment of the civil rights guaranteed by law and by the Constitution, and to secure the equal protection of such civil rights without such discrimination. And whereas the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act provides additional protected classifications that enjoy the Commission's constitutionally sanctioned protection, including age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, height, weight, familial status, and marital status, and whereas the Michigan Civil Rights Commission understands that the security of civil rights within the state of Michigan may require appropriate laws that criminally outlaw and punish harmful behaviors and activities that perpetuate attitudes and beliefs that form the basis for discrimination against certain protected classifications identified in the Michigan Constitution and Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, and whereas the state of Michigan has acknowledged the appropriateness of criminally penalizing certain harmful behaviors and actions perpetuated against citizens in certain protected classification, affirmatively protecting the right of citizens to be free from unlawful intimidation by making a person guilty of ethnic intimidation if that person maliciously and with specific intent to intimidate or harass another person because of that person's race, color, religion, gender, or national origin, engages in specific acts as set forth in the Michigan Penal Code MCL 750.147B, and whereas acts of desecration within the state of Michigan that are motivated by hatred for and discrimination against classifications of individuals protected under the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act should be responsibly addressed through appropriate executive and legislative action. And therefore, it is resolved that the Michigan Civil Rights Commission supports and encourages executive and legislative efforts intended to deter, prohibit, and where necessary, criminally penalize actions and activities of hate crimes and desecration against appropriate classifications of individuals protected under the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act.
Thank you, Commissioner Lara. I will entertain a motion to adopt the resolution.
Madam Chair?
Madam Chair, I have a point of clarification with
Yes,
respect to the,
Before I accept any motions, yes, make your point of clarification, Attorney Satchel.
the second whereas should include genetic information, arrest record, and physical and mental disability with respect to classifications that enjoy protection, and should be added to this. I apologize, it was not added to this.
Okay, so that is, at this point, just added language. It doesn't need to be
Yes.
amended. It just needs to be added.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Now I will entertain a motion, and Commissioner Worthams, I heard you.
Yeah, first, let me make sure I understand where we're adding the language. You said it was in the second whereas?
The second whereas, where it lists the other classifications, added to that should be genetic information, arrest record, and physical and mental disability.
Okay. Madam Chair, I move the adoption of the resolution as with the amended, the added language.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Worthams. Is there a second?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Londo. Is there any discussion or revisions? And we've had one revision. Please point out for me one more time, Attorney Satchel, where is the additional language?
Yeah.
Second,
The
whereas.
second whereas, where it lists other protected classifications, those three should be added, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion or revisions?
Madam Chair.
First Commissioner Lara and then Commissioner Worthams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is an important resolution to consider in light of many actions and activities that are starting to happen around the state of Michigan as well as this country. There have been acts of desecration among Jewish synagogues in Grand Rapids, as well as other examples of hate crimes, as well as just people being intimidated by this, by what is happening. I think it's important that the Civil Rights Commission does honor this and make a resolution to ascertain that citizens and the people in the state of Michigan are protected.
Thank you, Commissioner Lara. Commissioner Worthams? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Londo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. They say that a lie has a chance to get around the world before the truth has an opportunity to put on its pants, but I would actually say in the instance of this legislation, the truth didn't even get to the dresser to put on its pants before a lie was rampantly throughout the world and across society and on Fox News and in a lot of other places. And I just want to make abundantly clear for people tuning in today that this piece of legislation doesn't criminalize misgendering or using incorrect pronouns of an individual. And people have tried to make a tortured argument that misusing somebody's pronouns in addition to stalking, harassing conduct, therefore equals the criminalization of misusing somebody's pronouns. But in cases like that, it is the harassing conduct, it is the stalking, it is other similar conduct that is criminal. It is not the misuse of somebody's pronouns. So while everybody has the right to hate speech under the First Amendment, they do not have the right to engage in conduct that is, results in intimidation, results in stalking, results in harassment. And I'd like to specifically applaud Representative Noah Arbit for not only introducing this legislation, but addressing the rampant misinformation that is spread. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Londo. Commissioner Worthams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to note that at our last meeting, we adopted a resolution condemning the use of the Holocaust as a divisive measure in Michigan, and I was very proud to author and introduce that resolution. Part of that resolution is to highlight the importance of making sure that people are not necessarily careful with their words per se, but are aware of the damage that flippant language can cause to others, whether it's just harm, whether it's intimidation, whether it's something more devious than that. And so I am grateful that this resolution is before us today, because I think it continues our efforts to promote that message and to, in our role of advising not just the legislature and the governor, but the people of Michigan about the issues of civil rights that are out there today, and some of that being, frankly, abuses of the First Amendment. So I urge my fellow commissioners to vote in favor of this resolution, and look forward to doing so myself.
Thank you, Commissioner Worthams, and I'd like to further add that in my other role as a CEO of a large nonprofit located in Detroit, Michigan, that is built on advocacy and engagement with our community, I have participated in a working group that came out of an incident that happened to Jadonna Matthews Dingus in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, approximately 2 years ago, where her neighbor tried to intimidate her with the use of what constitutes a Klan flag in his window so that she could see it from her home. And much of the language that State Representative Noah Arbert has included in the language in his legislation, rather, includes the language that came out of her working group that she started surrounding this incident. And I think it speaks volumes to the fact that individuals can get stuff done at both the state level and with commissions like our own and with departments like the Michigan Civil Rights Department if they are willing to take the issue on and make sure that it is recognized and that this kind of hate speech and things that are done to intimidate people who just are different in some way, maybe, or maybe not even different, comes about. So just wanted to put that on the record. Anything else from any other commissioners? Thank you so much. Seeing no more hands for discussion, Mr. Satchel, will you please call the rolls for adoption of the resolution?
Commissioner El Hassan,
Support.
Commissioner Lara,
Support.
Commissioner Barker,
Support.
Commissioner Corvo,
Support.
Commissioner Londo,
Support.
Commissioner Worthams,
Support.
Commissioner Roberson.
Support.
Madam Chair, unanimously passes.
Thank you again, Attorney Satchel. Again, the motion carries unanimously and the resolution is adopted. Thank you, Commissioner Lara, for supporting this resolution, and thank you, Attorney Satchel, for your assistance in preparing this resolution. Our next agenda item is review of a request for an AG legal opinion. Mr. Satchel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the commission will recall its last meeting on a motion by Commissioner Londo and revisions, amendments by Commissioner Lara, we submitted to the AG's office a request for a legal opinion to deal with several issues that were brought up in the amendment dealing with certain conduct against LGBTQ folks in the LGBTQ community, and then other classifications within the covered by the Larson Civil Rights Act. I believe at the time some of the commissioners had questions or maybe some concern with respect to the broad nature and the scope, comprehensiveness of the question. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Commissioner El Hassan did. We subsequently submitted that question to the AG's office for a legal opinion, and we received a response back. The response basically is seeking more clarification from us with respect to the question. We have had an opportunity to talk with the attorneys in the AG office about the opinion, and we believe that the proper thing to do at this stage is to allow the department to work on crafting a question to be submitted to the AG's office that addresses the issues that were brought up in the prior request, and we would ask that so that we don't have to come back to the commission, that we be allowed to work on the question to make sure it addresses all of the issues addressed by a clarification required by the AG's office. And of course, we will submit that question to the commission to copy you on the submission of that request for legal opinion before we do so.
Thank you, Attorney Satchel. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Commissioner Londo made the original request. So since this is related to the motion you initially made, Commissioner Londo, on this subject at our last meeting, are you prepared to present a new motion in light of the information provided by Mr. Satchel and the request from the department?
Yes, Madam Chair, and thank you. And thank you, Attorney Satchel, for that report. And I just want to say how much and I think this body trusts the staff to get such an important issue right. And I think it's appropriate to empower the staff to act on our behalf. So I move that the Michigan Civil Rights Commission direct the Michigan Department of Civil Rights to formulate and submit an appropriate legal question or questions to the Attorney General that addresses the concerns set forth in the Commission's request for legal opinion provided to the Department of Attorney General on May 26th, 2023.
Thank you, Commissioner Londo, for the motion. Is there a second?
Support.
Commissioner Lara has supported. Is there any discussion? Seeing no hands for discussion, Mr. Satchel, will you please call the roll for adoption of the motion?
Commissioner El Hassan,
Support.
Commissioner Lara,
Support.
Commissioner Barker,
Support.
Commissioner Corvo,
Support.
Commissioner Londo,
Support.
Commissioner Worthams,
Support.
and Commissioner Roberson.
Support.
Madam Chair, unanimously passes.
Thank you, Attorney Satchel. The motion carries unanimously and is adopted, and thank you to Commissioner Londo. We are now going to go back to a discussion about the Housing Discrimination Conference. Executive Director Johnson proposes that the commission engage its resources and focus to address a very important and timely issue, one that is extremely significant to me personally as well as professionally, as I am sure it is to my fellow commissioners. That issue is housing discrimination. This is an issue whose deep historical roots have strangled and devastated generations of citizens, particularly African Americans, and continues to plague the African American community and other communities of color and marginalized citizens. The intersection between home ownership, wealth generation, stable communities, education, and health outcomes, and quality of life in general, to name a few, is well documented and understood by many individuals and institutions who study this matter. If we as a commission are to continue the bold and responsible legacy of our former sister and brother commissioners in the pursuit and securing of civil rights and equity, we can no more afford to ignore this issue than they could in addressing the critical civil rights issue of their time. I welcome this opportunity to listen to Executive Director Johnson as he lays before us a vision and plan for addressing one of the most pernicious and persistent civil rights issues confronting our nation. I welcome any comments on this issue from my fellow commissioners before I give Executive Director Johnson the floor. Are there any comments, conversation, discussion, commissioners? All right, Director Johnson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that excellent introduction. Nothing more needs to be said. You certainly laid it out in terms of the imminent and apparent and historical problems that exist within the housing area in terms of discrimination. Yes, what we're envisioning, and we certainly touched upon it a little earlier, is perhaps not quite a two full day session, but what we're proposing is perhaps this commission have public hearings on the first day. I think Mr. Core may have mentioned maybe, and we're just proposing between maybe 3 and 7, so you can get those participants who certainly work during the day and may want to come in the evening and give us some testimony. Lived experiences, people who have gone through this, who have experienced discrimination, both from a racial perspective, from the LGBTQ community, persons with disabilities, all have experienced housing discrimination, probably in some form or another. We look at housing as certainly the key to health and wealth. Certainly, your health is determined by where you live, and that was discussed during our summit recently, where we talked about the redlining and how, and certainly a lot of communities are redlined into areas that have poor air, asthma, etc. Lead pipes. So that's certainly important in terms of where you live and how it affects your health. And certainly it affects your wealth. It's the start of a legacy, certainly that you can pass on for generations within your respective family. So we're looking at, maybe a two-day, as I mentioned, starting with this commission taking public hearing, taking testimony from not only folks who have lived experiences, but also from some experts, perhaps, private sector who can come in and talk about what they've done. There's some good practices out there. We wanted to emphasize that during the second day, which we see as certainly information to address what we heard the first day, but also to provide resources, information to those who've been affected by this discrimination. We've talked to the Department of Insurance and Financial Services in terms of insurance and credit, MISHDA in terms of housing, talked to some fair housing centers. They're all ready to leap in and be a part of this. As you know, housing is a big part of what we do. In terms of we have a contract with HUD to do fair housing work. So we're looking at issues like appraisal bias, insurance redlining, property tax assessments, fair housing practices, credit discrimination. All those things would add up to the fact that there's been the inability of certain communities in order to attain housing and attain wealth. Even within our own department, Dr. Jerome Reed, who is our legislative liaison, spoke about how he was a victim of appraisal bias in his own home. Tried to sell his home. He had to take down everything in his home in order to be able to get a decent appraisal for it. So it exists. We certainly want to explore those opportunities. This is aimed. We don't want to fall into a situation where we have 100, 150 complaints, have to investigate them all. This is aimed towards policy reformation from a public and private perspective. We'd like to bring in Michigan Bankers Association, maybe even Huntington Bank. They have a very vigorous program in their bank which determines equity and talks about discrimination. Talk about the Community Reinvestment Act obligations of banks in order to invest in communities. A lot of issues that are out there that can be explored, but again, aimed at policy reformation. What we can suggest to our legislature in terms of policy initiatives that can turn this around, well, what we can do in terms of best practices for private entities. Again, building upon what other banks are doing already in order to spread the word about what you can do in order to avoid housing discrimination. So that's the vision. We did talk about perhaps having it in Detroit. I was approached during the 60th anniversary march, Civil Rights March we had recently, and a lady approached me and wondered why we had our 2 summits outside of Detroit. She couldn't get there. And explained that a lot of people who need our services cannot get to these venues. So we said, okay, well, next one we'll try to have it in Detroit to make sure that we do attract a large crowd, but also recognizing what Commissioner Lara said in terms of, and all of us in terms of wanting to make sure that we get testimony from across the state. So looking at, again, and a venue, I already explored a possible venue in Detroit, Wayne County Community College District. I've talked to them. They have a facility downtown, which would afford us opportunity to have a public hearing, breakout sessions, parking's available, free parking. So I've already made some inquiries with them in terms of using their facility for such a hearing and conference. So that's the vision. Commissioners really wanted to see if you had a desire to have such a public hearing, which again would be the initiation of this process.
Thank you, Director Johnson, for your presentation. Commissioners, I know we've discussed this a little bit earlier and hearing again from Director Johnson. Is there a motion to adopt the proposed action from Executive Director Johnson?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Elisan. Is there support?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Worthams. Any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Worthams.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director, for laying out the vision there. And I appreciate that in your sharing of that vision, you mentioned the Community Reinvestment Act. You mentioned a desire to work with Huntington and with the Michigan Bankers Association. I'm going to throw out a couple other acronyms at you as well, of folks that we should probably include in that, and that would be the Community Bankers Association of Michigan and the Michigan Credit Union League as well. I think if we're going to truly craft a policy that addresses the discrimination in Michigan, in the housing market, you've got to get all of the folks who are contributing money towards those mortgages. And that, while the Michigan Bankers Association will focus on the larger banks, the Flagstars, the Huntingtons, the Commericas, the Community Bankers Association will get you the range banks, the Hans banks that you might see around here in Marquette. Some of the smaller banks in Michigan. So I think that's very, very important. And of course, the credit unions have a large number of credit unions in the state as well. I'm going to throw out another name for you to include in this because I think history and being told history accurately is very key in any sort of policy discussion. And so when you take a look at the redlining in Detroit and you take a look at the construction of 375 and the destruction of Black Bottom, you've got to actually dig into that. And so I would suggest you contact my classmate Jamon Jordan, who is the official historian of the city of Detroit.
He is amazing.
And he is amazing. And I'll save the other stories I know about him later. But I think Jamon will do an excellent job showing that history and then how that history plays out throughout the years. Well, one action in the 20s leads to other actions in the 80s and what have you. So I think that would be very, very key. I think the other aspects that we need to tackle in this, and I'm not quite sure how to tackle this, this might require us to put our heads together in a brainstorming session, is how do we tackle the discrimination in the town gown communities? Where you're will have a lot of rental housing discrimination, which could prohibit people from attending or getting their degrees from U of M, from Western, from Northern, from where have you. I think many folks will agree, yes, there are two paths, skilled trades and higher education, that will lead to increased income down the road. For those who are going down the higher education path, once they're out of the dorms that sophomore year and then going into their junior and senior years, if they cannot find a place to live, how do you expect them to finish their degrees? And in many instances, I have heard that landlords, rental folks who own rental property, will see a name and see it say Johnson, but then see a name over here that might say Williams, and will prefer to lend to the Williams because that's the non-minority sounding name. I think that's something that needs to be addressed as well. And again, this policy is going to be global. It's going to be so large, and so again, I don't know how we tap into the town gown communities. I don't know if it's the Rental Owners Association. I don't even know if there's what the current Rental Owners Association is. But I think that's something that needs to be a part of this as well. But I congratulate you, Director, on that vision, on capturing a lot of the things that are necessary to that, and I look forward to voting in favor of the motion, and I urge the rest of my commissioners to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Worthams. Are there any other comments? Questions, concerns? Hearing nothing further, I would ask that Mr. Satchel please call the roll for adoption of the motion.
Commissioner El Hassan,
Support.
Commissioner Lara,
Support.
Commissioner Barker,
Support.
Commissioner Corvo,
Support.
Commissioner Londo,
Support.
Commissioner Worthams,
Support.
and Commissioner Roberson.
Support.
Madam Chair, it unanimously passes.
Thank you very much, Attorney Satchel, and the motion does carry unanimously and is adopted. Executive Director Johnson, thank you for proposing this very important initiative, and we look forward to working with you to make it a success. Thank you again. We will now move on to our next order of business, which is public comment. This is the second public comment opportunity we mentioned earlier, and we will continue to follow the same protocol set forth by Attorney Satchel earlier in the meeting. Attorney Satchel will continue to serve as timekeeper. We will start with our in-person audience. Ms. Sanford, have we received any public comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no forms for public comment.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sanford. Hearing none, we will move on to our closed session portion of our meeting for discussion of a personnel and legal matter. I will entertain a motion to convene a closed session for discussion of personnel and legal matters.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Worthams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that in accordance with the Open Meeting Act, that the Michigan Civil Rights Commission proceed into a closed session to discuss a personnel matter and to discuss pending litigation. And I'm aware that this motion requires a roll call vote under the Act.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Worthams. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Londo. Any discussion? Now, please, would you take a roll call, Mr. Satchel?
Commissioner El Hassan, Commissioner Lara,
Support.
Commissioner Barker,
Support.
Commissioner Corvo,
Support.
Commissioner Londo,
Support.
Commissioner Worthams,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberson.
Support.
Unanimous support.
Thank you so much for that. We will now move into closed session. At this time, the Commissioners, Director Johnson and Attorney Satchel will convene in the Peninsula 5 Ballroom for closed session. The time is 11:29. Following closed session, we will reassemble back to this meeting room to continue the final two agenda items, commissioner closing comments and adjournment. We will reconvene following closed session. Thank you. Like flying through my words. I have to go to the restaurant. I now call the meeting of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission back to order. The time is 11:54. The closed session has concluded. Commissioners, I will entertain a motion to reconvene the meeting of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission.
So moved.
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Elasan and Commissioner Worthams. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to reconvene the meeting of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion carries unanimously, and the meeting of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission is reconvened. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and cooperation. At this time, I believe there's a motion from Commissioner Elasan.
That's correct. Thank you, Chair. I move to support the recommendation of Attorney Satchel regarding a personnel matter that was discussed in closed session.
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Elasan. Thank you, Commissioner Worthams. That would help. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Our next agenda item is commissioner closing comments. My fellow commissioners, does anyone have closing comments before we adjourn?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Worthams.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I just want to, thank you for coming to Marquette when Commissioner Londo and I kind of initially jokingly suggested that we come up into the UP back in our October meeting. Didn't really think that would stick, and here we are today in beautiful Marquette, Michigan, the home of Representative Jen Hill from the 109th House District, and also Senator Ed McBroom of the 38th State Senate District. And I think it's great that for at least 4 days of the year that this commission does what it can to reach out to the folks of Michigan throughout the entire state. We have a wonderful state, even if it does take us 6 or 8 hours to get here, depending on where we go. But it's in making that drive yesterday, it occurred to me in the different communities and different counties that I traveled through, how many of those issues that the folks there have are the same as the folks in Detroit, or the same in Lansing and Grand Rapids. And so I think it's wonderful that even if it's just 4 days a year, that we do what we can to get out of those areas and reach out to the citizens of Michigan. And I'm very grateful to the folks here at Northern Michigan University for their hospitality, to Commissioner Londo for your hospitality as well, taking me to a new restaurant last night. And I look forward to our next meeting, which I believe is in Traverse City, where we'll have discussion about where else in the UP we can go for next year. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Worthams. Any other comments?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Corvo and then Commissioner Londo.
Yeah, on a somber note, before the Voting Rights Act, before the Civil Rights Act, before the Michigan Civil Rights Before Commission, unfortunately there was Emmett Till. And I think a lot of us probably remember that tomorrow is Emmett Till's birthday. And I think that should be put in the notes. As brutal as his murder was, I think it put into movement some of the things that the positive aspects that we're dealing with today. And he'll be 82 years old tomorrow.
Fantastic.
That's amazing. Thank you, Commissioner Corvo. And I think we can include that in our record, in our minutes. Thank you so much. Commissioner Londo.
Madam Chair, thank you. I want to make it clear, I was not joking at our October meeting about coming out to Marquette.
And it came to fruition.
I would like to thank everybody for making the trip up. I know, as all of us are civil rights practitioners, we all come from varied lived experiences, varied backgrounds, and the Upper Peninsula and my upbringing, and as somebody that grew up in Marquette and claims Marquette, this area really, really informed the perspective through which I look at civil rights issues. So not only thank you to everybody for coming here, but I thank you for coming here so that you can better understand the lens at which I look through a lot of these issues. Additionally, congratulations to the department as well as to all of us who advocated to legislatures as it relates to the appropriation. It's very, very exciting that this department has the resources it needs to do its very, very important work. And while some people may, call the dedicated practitioners the pronoun police, I recognize that that is a absurdly reductionist characterization of the very, very important work that the department does protecting the rights of the most vulnerable Michiganders. Lastly, fun history lesson for this commission. About 10 years ago, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights reached out to the Department of Education asking them to withhold some funding for schools that used racist imagery, racist mascots, and other offensive depictions of Native Americans and others, and in the state of Michigan, still numerous of those. And while I think that request went unheeded, every year since then, the department has sent a letter to all of the school districts in the state of Michigan that continue to use mascots that disproportionately characterize a protected class or a minority community in the state of Michigan. A couple weeks ago, the Marquette School Board disbanded the use of Redmen and Redettes. And a long time ago, the superintendent of the Marquette School District was a big fan of the Harvard Crimson and that particular color red. So when Marquette became the Red Men, it was based off of that. Somewhere along the line after that, they decided to sort of reappropriate Red Men as a Native American chief. So, growing up in the city of Marquette and playing sports for the Marquette School District, recognized that, I wore clothing and hoodies and other materials that had a rather offensive, caricature and depiction of the Native American community. There's generations of students that went through the Marquette School District that had yearbooks depicting spears and other Native American imagery. And a few years ago, they actually sent a survey out to the Marquette community saying, where do you fall on this particular issue? And granted, about 60% of the people that responded, did not feel that it was offensive. But, much in the same way that I wouldn't appreciate other people making decisions as it relates to LGBTQ issues that aren't members of the community, the Native American community was pretty forceful in their recommendation and belief that, that they did not feel honored, they did not feel respected, they did not feel appreciated by that. So it's exciting as a graduate of Marquette to see, where we are now and recognizing that there's a really, really unique opportunity for this community to pick a mascot that everybody can support, that everybody feels proud of, that everybody feels included by. So, once again, the work of this commission is being reflected in communities across the state, and it's just very serendipitous that 2 weeks after that decision, we are here in my hometown.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Any other comments from any other commissioners? Hearing none. I'm sorry, Commissioner Lara.
Sorry, I also wanted to congratulate our chair, Portia Robertson, on being named to the new commission for marketing the state as a home of opportunity for all.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Lara. Again, the person who asked me did not lead with the fact that that's where the work is going to be done. So, of course, I accept it before I realize that I have no more room or time on my plate, but we will make it happen because seeing the population grow in Michigan and looking at some of the issues that concern those folks who are either coming back from higher education, colleges and universities across the country, or those who we want to stay here is a vital part of the success of the state of Michigan. So, thank you.
And I'd like to add that my daughter, who is 33, recently accepted a position at a major furniture manufacturer in Grand Rapids. But the reason she accepted it is because they are really focused on the corporate culture and making certain that everyone is welcomed and everyone feels like they belong, and their thoughts and their comments are taken seriously. So I think that could be a way to start determining how to really focus on the future of Michigan.
Great, I agree. Okay, as we adjourn this meeting of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, please note that our next meeting will convene on Monday, October 23rd, 2023, in Traverse City at a time and location to be determined. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Elasan, is there a second?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Worthams. We have, all in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? I didn't think I would hear any. The motion to adjourn carries unanimously, and the meeting of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission is adjourned. The time is now 12:02. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.